Okay, cellular respiration here. So again, this is just going to be generic overview. So if you want, you can put it on the back of those sheets or on whatever you've been using for notes. Cellular respiration is a process that releases energy from food in the presence of oxygen.
This is the stuff we're running on the back.
Yeah. Or in whatever you use for notes. Up to you. Okay. And when I say it's releasing energy from food, what am I talking about specifically for food?
What do you mean?
Monomer of carbohydrates,
Glucose?
glucose. So specifically releasing energy from glucose. This is very similar to what happens in your car. Glucose is a similar molecule actually to the ethanol and the gasoline that you put in your car. Although don't substitute it. Please don't put sugar in.
Can't that run an engine?
Yes,
Oh, it does.
absolutely.
Sugar in your
So,
No.
not
That's what you get.
unless you were doing it on the back. Otherwise you can do it wherever.
So then how did the record run for these cars?
I have no idea.
I think that was a shooter car.
Maybe it worked off glucose. A little bit different.
Sugar rush or whatever.
Okay. But just like in your car, gas gets put in it. You put that gasoline in the presence of oxygen, you give it a spark, and then that gasoline burns to release energy. So, if you want to think about it that way, you think in terms of cellular respiration, you all are just cars with emotions.
Emojis.
Okay. Here's an important piece. Energy is stored in the bonds that hold atoms together. We kind of talked about that during our thermite video yesterday. Breaking a bond releases energy. Building a bond costs energy.
The
So-
bonds that keep what together?
Atoms together. So I have a molecule of glucose here. If I am to break one of the bonds here, is that costing energy or is it releasing energy? Releasing energy. So that's why in the thermite reaction, they broke the bonds between that iron and oxygen, and that released energy. And it released more energy than it took to build the bond between aluminum and oxygen. And so that is why all that extra energy was being released. Here is the overall equation for cellular respiration. You have 6O2 plus C6H12O6 is going to yield 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus energy. Simplify. Because there's a lot of steps that take place in the middle in that arrow. This is just what you start with, and this is what you end with. Okay. What does the O2 stand for? Oxygen. This is just 6 oxygen molecules. What does C6H12O6 stand for?
Sugar.
Sugar, specifically glucose. Yields, what is CO2?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide, so we have 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. H2O is water. So we have 6 molecules of water plus energy. So you have oxygen and glucose. You're going to break the bonds in that glucose and you're going to end up forming 6 carbon dioxides 6 waters and energy will be left over on that side of the equation. Same place wherever you just wrote this slide. Third slide for that. Third slide to get specific to the sheet. Okay, any questions on the equation or this in general? Okay. Purpose and steps of cellular respiration. Organisms use a molecule that is known as adenosine triphosphate. You just need to know it as ATP to store energy. Basically, when you think ATP, you should think energy dollars or energy currency. 1 ATP is like having $1 in just terms of energy for your body. The purpose of cellular respiration is to transfer energy from glucose, specifically in the bonds of glucose, into energy in the bonds of ATP. So, we have our molecule of glucose again. Is it releasing or absorbing energy when I pull this apart?
Releasing.
Releasing. That energy that gets released when I break glucose, your body is going to capture, and then it's going to use it to build ATP. I don't have a molecule of ATP with me, but it uses it to build ATP. So it's just transferring energy is all it's doing. Because we can't use glucose directly for energy, but we can turn that energy from it into ATP, which your body can then use. Normal respiration is going to have 4 steps, and these correspond to the 4 steps on each page of the study guide. Glycolysis, pyruvate processing, the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle, and then the electron transport chain. Any questions on the purpose of cell respiration? Okay. The next slide is when we start talking about glycolysis, which is the front sheet.
It's just not focused. There we go.
All right, so taking a look at glycolysis here. Glycolysis, if you look at the word, glyco means sugar or glucose. lysis means to cut or break something. So we are literally breaking glucose in the process of glycolysis.
So this is the front page?
This is talking about the front page. The next slide is the like fill in the box. But now we're actually talking about that front page. So without glucose, this process cannot work because you can't break apart glucose. How many of you have saw a video of marathon runners that they literally cannot move because they're at near the end or whatever? Those people literally don't have any glucose. They have nothing left in the tank for their body to use.
I've had that happen before. Not quite to like where I can't move, but like to where like I couldn't take full steps at all, and I couldn't like bend down because if I tried to bend down, I just collapsed.
Yep.
So,
At that point, you're just trying to shove a pop down their throat. Get as much sugar into them in liquid form as you can. So, glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm. We'll talk about organelles during Unit 4. Cytoplasm is actually just the kind of liquid portion in the liquid space in a cell. So there's nothing really specific for location-wise where it's happening. But great things about glycolysis, you form two NADH molecules. We don't need to worry about NADH until the very last step. Just know that it will eventually be used to turn it into ATP. So eventually NADH is going to help transfer energy. You also form 4 ATP from glycolysis. So hey, there's $4 right there. Who doesn't want $4? Glycolysis also happens extremely fast. You can get millions of ATP in a very, very short period of time. And the last one, and the biggest benefit of glycolysis, is that it does not require oxygen. You can undergo glycolysis while you are holding your breath. How many of you watched Caleb Dressel when he swam the 50-meter freestyle race this summer at the Olympics?
No.
Nobody in here? Splash and dash?
We watch it?
We don't have time to get through it. Maybe at the end of class. But basically, the 50-meter free is not even down and back. It is just down the pool. Just one length of the pool is all it is. He swam that 50-meter free. I don't remember what his time was, but he did it without coming up for breath, a single breath. He did the entire thing while holding his breath. That's how fast he swam that race. Because his body was relying on glycolysis, where he did not need oxygen, and he could get that ATP to fuel his muscles down the entire length of the race. He had trained his body to the point where he could do that without taking a breath and having enough energy formed through glycolysis to get the entire length of the pool. Cons of glycolysis: you have to spend 2 ATP in order for it to happen. So just like you need that spark in your car to get that gasoline to burn, you have to spend 2 ATP. So as a result, you only end up gaining 2 ATP. You spend 2 and you get 4. So you get 2 ATP. To put that in perspective, if you laid on your couch and did absolutely nothing for 24 hours, you would burn 68 million ATP. So is 2 ATP a lot? No, not really. And there's still a ton of energy available in the molecules left over. You only access about 10% of what's available in glucose. So, glycolysis, really, really good for your sprinters, but for life it is very inefficient. It's not a great process. And that's why there's 3 more steps that take place after this. questions so far? Glycolysis. Now, we've talked about it in words, now we're gonna take a look at what's happening from an atomic and molecular standpoint. So, what molecule did I say you start off with? Glucose. You need glucose to start the process. How many carbons does glucose have? 6. So, when we're going through this, really we're just keeping track of carbons this entire time. So, in that top box of that study guide, draw 6 carbons with a dash in between them to show that they are bonded together, because remember, energy is stored in those bonds. And then maybe in parentheses, you could write down that this is glucose. This one is big to know. You need to know that you start off with glucose. Okay? Then you see here this ATP, ADP. What analogy did I use for ATP? What do we also call it? Money. It's our energy dollars. So you have to spend 2 ATP to get things going. That's the spark you have to give. When you spend ATP, they become ADP. Who can tell me what adenosine what does tri mean? 3. When you spend it, it becomes adenosine diphosphate. What does di stand for? 2. So, but the one you need to know is that you are spending 2 ATP. 2 ATP become 2 ADP. The resulting molecule, you still have the 6 carbons, 4, 5, 6, but we built bonds. Remember, building bonds cost energy, and that's why we had to spend 2 ATP. You get this 6 carbon chain with phosphates on either side. You don't need to know really anything about this molecule. It's just to help you see what's taking place in the middle here.
Does that say 2 ATP and 2 ADP?
Yes, you're spending ATP. So you don't need to know that this is hexose bisphosphate. You don't need to know anything about it. I'm just showing you the process here. Okay? And then I'm going to focus on one side here because it's a mirror image. So what's happening on the right side is also happening on the left side here. This molecule is very unstable, and as a result, it splits in half. So you get the CCC-P on one side, you get the P-CCC on the other side. So it just splits in half. And again, this is not a molecule that you need to know. You don't need to know that this is triose phosphate. I'll give you, I'll star the stuff that is important to know. Okay? Then from there, you're going to, draw this P a little bit better. You're going to break that phosphorus off. Remind me what happens when you break bonds? It releases energy. So that energy gets released and you form 2 ATP, just the reverse here. They end up being formed from 2 ADP. Really what you need to know is that this is 2 ATP being formed here. And you end up with a molecule that I said will be important later. What was that molecule?
NADH.
NADH. So here they call it reduced NAD. It's NADH. And it actually gets formed from NAD+. That's not important. You just need to know it's getting formed, or you're forming NADH. When you break this phosphorus off, what are you left with? You break this phosphorus off, you're left with CCC, 3 carbon chain. Can anybody read what its name is?
Pi something.
Pi something.
No idea.
It is pyruvate. And that is the last thing you need to know here, is that you finish glycolysis with 2 molecules, one on the right, one on the left here, of pyruvate. And who can tell me what step 2 of cell respiration is?
Pyruvate processing.
Pyruvate processing. So what, do you think we're gonna need this molecule for the next step? Yes.
Yeah.
So, but this is glycolysis. We start with glucose. We gain 2 ATP we gain 4 ATP for a net of 2. We gain 2 NADH, one on the right, one on the left. We finish with pyruvate. That pyruvate ends up being used in the next step. Okay. Overall, just keeping track of totals here, this is just what it is. Glycolysis also ends up producing 2 waters through this process, although we aren't really concerned with those waters at all here. So, are there any questions on glycolysis?
What about the other side?
It's the same, it's the same.
It's a mirror image, it's the same thing, I just wanted to only do it once. So, up to you how you wanna fill that in or not fill that in. Because there will be a lot of times where the same thing is happening to both sides or to both molecules. I'm just only gonna draw one or talk about one, but the same thing is happening to both. Okay, I guess we do have time if we wanna watch Caleb Dressel.
We should watch it.
Yes.
Okay, that is all we have for today. Nice job.
Diving homework?